Hello. Welcome to the first real class of CSC 321. Most of the lectures will follow fairly closely along with the book, and this week's lectures will be covering Chapter 1, an introduction to the management of information security. So over the course of this chapter, each chapter has a set of learning objectives. Basically, once you finish a chapter in this book, you should be able to do a set of different things. For this one, you'll be able to describe the importance of a manager's role in securing an organization's use of IT, information technology. You'll be able to list and discuss the key characteristics of information security, list and describe the dominant categories of threats that are posed against information security, discuss the key characteristics of leadership and management, which was the subject of the lab that is due as of the time I'm recording this later today, and differentiate information security management from general business management. So IT is a vehicle that stores and transports information from one part of a business to another part. Unfortunately, as is often the case, technology tends to break down. What happens if that vehicle does break down? Over time, the concept of general computer security has been replaced by the concept of information security. Rather than focusing exclusively on the hardware and software, we're focused now on the data that hardware and software works with. Information security is no longer the sole responsibility of a single discrete group of people. It's now treated as the responsibility of every employee, with special treatment given to the managers, or special responsibility given to the managers. Organizations must realize that information security decisions should involve three groups of people, the communities of interest, and we'll be referring to these periodically throughout the semester. Those in the field of information security, those in the field of IT, and everyone else in the organization. So the first group, their job is to protect the organization's information assets from a variety of different threats that they face. Information technology supports the business objectives of the organization by supplying and supporting IT, or information tech, appropriate to the business's needs. Basically, they are the department that uses technology to do things that the business wants to get done. And then the rest of the people belong to the general business group. They articulate and communicate the different organizational policy and objectives, and then management specifically allocates resources to the other two groups, the other communities of interest. So let's begin with a fairly simple question that's much more complicated than it might seem. What is security? In order to understand the technical aspects of InfoSec, you have to know the definitions of certain terms and concepts in IT. In general, security, for the purpose of this course, will be defined as being free from danger. To be secure is to be protected from the risk of loss, damage, unwanted modification, and any other hazard. Security is often achieved through a series of strategies undertaken at the same time and used in combination with one another. It's the role of management to ensure that security strategies are planned, organized, staffed, directed, and controlled. So there's a few different specialized areas of security. All of these have some relationship to information security. You got physical security, which is walls, doors, locks, armed guards in some highly sensitive areas, perhaps, operations security, communications security, cyber or computer security, and then network security. InfoSec focuses on the protection of information and that which gives it value. Three traits that you'll want to learn by heart, and you will learn by heart before the end of this course: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It includes the technology that houses and transfers that information through a bunch of different protection mechanisms like policy, training, awareness programs, and various pieces of technology. So this is a little bit of a visual diagram as to the components of information security. You'll see at the bottom, you've got confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which support the three pillars of computer security, data security, and network security, which all work to support policy, which then supports the management of information security, which then supports information security and information governance. And if you're not familiar with some of these terms, we'll go over them as they come up later on in this chapter and future chapters. So, confidentiality, integrity, and availability make up what's called the CIA triangle, which can sometimes be expanded into a more comprehensive list of characteristics of information. The CNSS security model, sometimes called the Macomber Cube after the guy who kind of made it popular. He didn't invent it, but he's the name everyone attaches to it, provides a bit more detail on what security actually is. While this model covers the three dimensions of information security, it also unfortunately omits more detailed discussion of the guidelines and policies that direct how you actually implement your different security controls. Another weakness is that it's kind of limited to view it only from a single perspective. So this is that model. You'll see it is a cube made up of a set of 27 smaller cubes. On one side, you've got confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the three pieces of data that give that data some kind of security value. From the bottom, you've got storage, processing, and transmission. These are the different states that data can be in. Data can be stored, data can be in use, and data can be traveling from one place to another. And then the top layer is policy, education, and technology. These are the different ways that we kind of protect that data. Policy is rules and guidelines and different things that the organization puts in place to sort of limit how data can be used. Education is fairly self-explanatory. It's education on how one protects data. And then technology is all of our technical controls, firewalls, password systems, things like that. So if you look at each of these individual cubes, you'll see the confidentiality of stored data and how can we protect that through policy. Basically, it gives you a way to divide out each of the different aspects of information security and talk about each one as they compare to each other individually. So this is a visual representation of the CIA triad. Now let's go over what each of those actually means. Confidentiality is an attribute of information that describes how the data is protected from disclosure or exposure to any systems or individuals that are unauthorized. Basically, you're limiting access to information only to those who need it and preventing access by those who don't. To protect confidentiality, we use a number of different measures. Classification, secure data storage, the application of security policy, education on how we should keep the data safe to the people who custode or work with that data, and then the end users, and cryptography, specifically encryption. Integrity is the attribute of information that describes that the data is whole, complete, and uncorrupted. Basically, when you create a piece of data, integrity ensures that nothing changed that data without proper permission. The integrity of information is threatened when exposed to corruption, damage, destruction, or otherwise disrupting its authentic state. So if some unauthorized user breaks in and changes some data, that's a violation of both confidentiality, because they broke in, and integrity, because they've changed the data in an unauthorized way. Corruption can occur while information is being typed in, stored, or transmitted. Availability is the attribute of information that describes that the data is accessible and correctly formatted for use without interference or obstruction. Basically, if confidentiality is keeping people who shouldn't see the data from seeing it, availability is making sure that the people who should be able to see it can. Availability of information means that users, either people or other systems, have access to it in a usable format. Availability doesn't imply that the information is accessible to every user, but it means that it can be accessed when needed by those who have the correct authorization. Privacy is another huge aspect of information security. In fact, because I'm a data privacy researcher, I would argue that security is actually an aspect of privacy. We're creating an entire degree program here at DSU revolving around privacy. And I would argue that security is but a subset of privacy. But this class is about information security, not about information privacy. Though, because of my research, you will likely get quite a bit of information about privacy you otherwise wouldn't. Privacy is, in the context of information security, the right of individuals or groups to protect themselves and their information from any unauthorized access. Another term for it is confidentiality. The information that is collected, used, and stored by an organization is to be used only for the purposes stated to the data owner at the time it was collected. In this context, privacy is not freedom from observation, which is one of the many meanings usually associated with the word. It means that the information will only be used in ways approved and consented to by the people who provide it. Another security flaw is information aggregation. Many organizations collect, swap, and sell personal information as a commodity. Information aggregation specifically is being able to glean more information by combining smaller pieces of information. So for example, if I simply told you my first name was Quentin, or if I told you that my last name was Covert, there's only so much that you can actually gain from that. Quentin isn't a common name, but it's common enough that you wouldn't be able to figure out exactly who I was from that name alone. And the same with Covert. But if I told you that my first name was Quentin and my last name was Covert, by combining the two, you narrow it down to, I believe there's 3 or 4 Quentin Coverts in America, which is significantly fewer than the number of Quentins and the number of Coverts. Today, it's possible to collect and combine personal information from several different sources, which has resulted in databases that could be used in ways that the original data owner didn't agree to or even has knowledge of. Identification is the access control mechanism whereby unverified entities who seek access to a resource provide a label by which they are known to the system. When you log in to anything, D2L, your email, YouTube, anything like that, your username is a form of identification. The computer says, I don't know who you are, and you say, I am this person. I'm identifying myself as this person. The information system possesses the characteristic of identification when it can recognize individual users. It's usually performed by means of a username or some kind of ID. Authentication, then, is your password. The access control mechanism that requires the validation and verification of an unauthenticated entity's purported identity. If you simply said, hi, this is my username, and the system let you in, it might have identification, but it doesn't have authentication. Only by pairing it with the correct password does the system say, okay, I have now authenticated who you are. I verified that you are the person you claim to be, and now you have access to the different pieces of the system. Individual users may disclose a PIN, a password, or a passphrase. Authorization is the access control mechanism that represents the matching of an authenticated person to what they're able to do. Once you've logged in, you have access to the courses that you have access to on D2L. You have access to your YouTube channel if you're on YouTube, things like that. After the identity of a user is authenticated, authorization defines what the user has been specifically and explicitly permitted by the proper authority to do, such as access, modify, or delete different contents within the information asset. Finally, accountability is the access control mechanism that ensures that all actions on a system, authorized or unauthorized, are attributed to an authenticated entity. Basically, whenever something happens on the system, a properly accountable system will make a record of it. This is mostly associated with system audit logs. Accountability of information occurs when a control provides assurance that every activity undertaken can be attributed to a named person or automated process. Basically, nothing on the system is done without properly connecting the identity of the person who did it to the action itself. So if someone changed your password and the system was unable to tell you who did that, that is a fault of accountability. There's no accountability to that action. So I will be breaking these lectures up into individual sections. So that was section 1 on an introduction to some of the definitions that we'll be using in this course. The next lecture will be on key concepts of information security, specifically the threats and attacks. Thank you.